Hello everyone, Jay Stropes here again. We're playing Vader Grixis build, doing another round versus Sabine Wren, the deck to beat by Rebel Spy. Both decks will be linked in the description. I've made a few sideboard trades for the Sabine deck. I put in Precision Fire, the one cost red unit that gives troopers the ability, it gives them a saboteur to get around sentinel units or defeat their shields. So there's been a few new cards that have come out since the original matchup. One of them is Moment of Peace. You can see right there. One of the main strategies of the deck was to use Security Complex to put shields on our Sentinel units to clog up the board, last a little bit longer against the aggro decks. Moment of Peace is a one-cost card in blue that lets us do the same thing. It really helps smooth out the deck, make our plays more consistent, and helps us last longer without relying quite so much on Security Complex. Before Moment of Peace was spoiled, when to use the Security Complex was a pretty big part of the game plan, because you're really trying to stick it on one unit. You could only really do that once. So Moment of Peace lets us do it 4 times with Security Complex base. You can see Precision Fire there. They opted to use that and attack our patrol craft. One thing I've noticed playing against the AI in the second few rounds is that with Precision Fire and a few other cards like that, sometimes they will swing into our units, try and trade for our units instead of attack our base, especially depending on ground or air. I'm not sure the optimal plays for that, if it's really doing the best. I really think that probably pushing damage on the base no matter what is probably the best strategy for the deck. So I think if you wanted to say there are some misplays sometimes, even with the Precision Fire, I did add it to the deck because I wanted to give it the best sideboard against our deck, right? If we were playing against a human opponent, they would be sideboarding in cards to try and trip us up. So I put in cards that I thought would do that. Right now, that is just Precision Fire because we traded it out for that event in yellow, that yellow event that gives them +3 power. The name of that is escaping me right now, but we're basically trading that 1 damage for being able to get around sentinels, and trading that 1 damage to get around that seems like a good trade for me, especially in this deck because it's got lots of troopers. I did think about adding Keep Fighting, a card that lets you ready a unit with 3 or less power, but at that point we would be having to switch out some of our white, some of Sabine's white cards, and you really want to keep as many of those in as you can because they'll trigger for a cause I believe in, and I really didn't think that there was a good way to switch out Keep Fighting at this point in the deck. You could trade some of the red units like Benthic 2 tubes or some of those other things, but they're really so good in the deck being 1 cost. I really did not think that switching out some of those red only units for Keep Fighting was really the best, because some of them, like Partisan Insurgent, are the type of cards that you would be wanting to hit with Keep Fighting itself. So cutting them to replace for an ability that you would be wanting to use with them just really didn't make much sense. So only 1 switch out on their deck so far. Our deck we've just added Make an Opening, which you can see right there, which gives a unit -2/-2 and heals 2 off of our base. I did switch out It Binds All Things for that. It does act as removal in this game. If you, the -2/-2, if you put them at 0 health at any point, that unit will be defeated. So it does add up with all of our incremental damage that this deck does put out with Vader, with Death Troopers, with other units. I thought it might be a bit more, have a bit more instances where it could be played versus It Binds All Things, which gets resourced, I'd say, about 3/4 of the time in my playtesting. Even with Fifth Brother and Seventh Sister and Vader himself, sometimes there's just not a bunch of damage on the unit because of all of our shields through the security complex and a moment of peace now, especially adding in all those extra hits for shields. There really is not a whole lot of damage that sits on our units anymore like there used to be. So switching that out for a little bit more consistent removal makes the most sense to me. I did try out Force Throw, which is a 1-cost red card that had also been spoiled recently. It makes the opponent discard a card from their hand. They get to pick which it is, so you don't see their hand. It's not a reveal or anything like that. If you have a force unit out, when you play it, you do damage equal to the discarded card's cost to a unit that's out. You can also target yourself with Force Throw. So if you've got a lot of high cost units, you could discard one of those and damage the enemy's unit with your own cards, but then you're down on card advantage. I think if your deck runs I Am Your Father, and you've got a lot of force units, then Force Throw becomes pretty good, because then if they say no to your I Am Your Father and then you draw into Force Throw, you can be pitching your own cards because it puts you up on cards a lot. Plus Force Throw is pretty cheap, so once you've got 4, you should be able to play I Am Your Father and Force Throw same turn, draw cards, discard one of the 3 cards that you drew. You're still up, and you get to get rid of units. So I think it can be pretty useful. The reason I don't have it in this deck right now is because in this particular matchup, it doesn't trade well with most of Sabine's units. I haven't tried it a lot versus other decks either yet. We don't have a lot of really high cost units in this deck. I don't play the 9 drops, the 8 drops, just because most matches we don't get up to that many, or if we do, they need to have some immediate impact on the board, and there's not a really great high drop in blue-black that does that. Emperor is probably the best in this color combination right now. Some of those more expensive Star Destroyers, which just let them pick what they bounce, it really doesn't help against aggro, because they'll just pick some cheap unit to bounce, and then they're going to keep attacking you. And even though you got your giant unit out, you're just going to die right away anyway. So, but back to Force Throw, that just means that since we don't have any expensive units, we're mostly trying to hit them, make them discard down, which can help because they do try and spit out a ton of units. But as you can kind of see, the vast majority of their units, their cost is like on Ezra there. Ezra costs 3, he's got 4 health. It's not like the card that you discard necessarily, because the costs are so low and the health is often so high, especially with experience counters. The card that they discard usually doesn't kill another card, and you're also only really able to do that when a force user is out already. So the majority of the time, you're either they're discarding and you're not dealing damage, or even if you do finally have a force user out, like you play Vader, you play Force Throw, the card they discard is Benthic Two Tubes, who costs one, or it's a Partisan Insurgent, who costs two, or Sabine right there. So you'll do two to something, maybe, but that doesn't get rid of their more troublesome units like their Falcon, or even stuff like that. Fleet, I think that's a fleet trooper who's right there. Fleet lieutenant. Yeah, I mean, right, it's got 3 health. So it just does not trade well with most of their units. So I had tried it. I played a number of games with it. It just really did not work out great in my experience. It was a little bit better to just run even cards like it binds all things, because when it hits, it is a good card, or even something like make an opening, because make an opening, another important part of that card is that it heals 2 from our base. So you can see right there, it'll put us back up to 11, especially in this matchup with Sabine constantly hitting our base. If we've got 3 of those in our deck, we're basically starting with about 4 or 6 more health on our base. If we were using a higher health base, which I think we could because we have Moment of Peace now to give our unit shields, that'd be even more damage that they'll need to kind of spit out. I have played a number of games from both sides. I think I've done a number of videos with this Vader Grixis build so far. The way that I like to play test is to take an idea, which in this case was stalling out the board, but keeping Vader instead of using Grand Inquisitor or something like that. I think he's just, in my experience, a kind of better. I don't know. Maybe it just fits my play style, but I think he's just kind of a better leader, better unit. He removes a lot. His on attack ability does a lot of damage, clears things out. Even his pinging throughout the game removes a lot of units as you stack damage on stuff, especially when combined with Death Troopers. Uh, he also takes out all of those. In mirror matches, you get rid of those stormtroopers, those ties, those cheap units, which isn't something you can do with another leader. But where I was kind of going with that was just I like to take a deck idea, go as far as I can, play against the best decks in the format, try and push it against those as much as I can. I think part of that and part of getting good experience is playing as those decks. So I will probably be playing some. I already played as Sabine quite a number of games, but some of my content on here, I'll probably be playing some of the better decks in the format, talking about that going along there, just because that will help us when we're doing deck building on whether it's this deck or other decks we come up with. Know what to do, because then we know what the other player's thinking, what they would be trying to do on their end, which helps a lot with strategy and deck building. As you can see here, I'm just trying to trade for units. I think this deck does a really good job. I know the AI is not the best all the time, and nor can it really be. It's not a human, but even goldfishing this and playing with proxies and stuff, this deck, especially with the Moment of Peace and some of these newer cards, really does a good job of stalling the game out. It's definitely capable of winning here. The AI plays quite a bit better when it's playing aggro, because it's trying to push damage, especially in that first game. I mean, it's always pushing damage on our base. Here in some of these more recent games, I don't know if it's with different cards added or things like that, if it's changing the calculations that it is doing in the background. But 9 times out of 10, the right answer is to push damage on our base, which does really good with aggro. When I tried, I spent an hour or two with these decks reversed. I played Sabine, I played this versus this Vader Grixis build, and in those 2 hours, I don't think there's like a handful of times that I actually put a shield counter on a Sentinel unit to jam us up. It really, when it's the AI itself is playing control, it does not think long term. It does not think about just future turns and what to do and how to move through that and balance that and parse that out. So when I play Sabine, I'm probably going to be trying to play other aggro decks, especially, I mean, like Iden too. I tried Iden. It really just does not uh, play Iden very well or play this deck very well, the Vader deck. So, which is fine. Just mentioning that to kind of explain like why we're not, switching it up. It really just did not play well. It played. It just wasn't fun to watch, and it wasn't fun for me to. It wouldn't be fun for me to like walk you through that, right? Because it just made plays that really just did not make very much sense for a person would never play that way. Versus these aggro games are close to how a person would play, and arguably pretty optimal sometimes. Here I have playing maximum firepower there. Just again, that's kind of like how this deck really performs pretty well with Vader. You couldn't do that with another leader because we had that damage stacked on there from earlier. I had switched out. Well, that was another switch I made. Maximum firepower I was trying out instead of takedown because we do have so many Imperial units, and takedown is really just gets rid of something that costs 5 less. So it's kind of like dealing 5 damage, although not exactly because it can defeat a unit with shields or on it. So, which maximum firepower wouldn't. Really, once you drop Vader, if you can swing a few times, the game is basically over, right? I've kept those lightsabers in, debated a little bit about taking them out, but they have worked out pretty well for me as more removal. All right, that'll be game. They don't have a way to stop us. There we go.